Welcome back to your weekly dose of Monday morning inspiration on the Gut 360 podcast, where we share nutrition tips, mindset tools, and actionable steps to help you thrive on your health journey. I'm your host, Ellie Breacher, a registered nutritionist on a mission to empower you to transform the health of your mind, body, and gut. Today, we are so lucky to be joined by Ian Marber, one of the best known and well regarded nutrition therapists in the UK. He's a best selling author, award winning health writer, and food expert known for his practical and balanced approach. And he's worked with over 20,000 private clients at his clinic in London. Ian also works with several high profile food and hospitality brands. He's a regular in print media, TV, and radio, and he's published 14 books on the subject of nutrition. Now, before we kick off, I'm going to ask you guys to hit the follow button for weekly episodes. It's the plus button on Apple Podcasts, or if you're on Spotify, it just says follow. It truly makes a massive difference and allows me to get amazing guests on the show like Ian. And on that note, welcome Ian Marber to the Gut 360 podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you here. Now, Ian, I spend far too much time on Instagram, but from the echo chamber that my algorithm is feeding me on social media, it seems like the entire UK population is starting their day with reformer Pilates. They're going to get avocado toast with poached eggs. They're getting in at least 12,000 steps a day, meal prepping, jumping on every wellness trend. Of course, I know that's not the case, and at the same time, we're having this major health crisis. So, can you start by telling us what is actually going on with our health in the UK?
Well, it's very interesting. You mentioned the algorithm. I think social media it's very easy to think that everyone's doing something, isn't it? I mean, that's the whole point of social media. And I mean, you mentioned your algorithm. My algorithm is full for some reason. I mean, I must have clicked once on a personal trainer offering online courses, and now it seems that I'm being just at the moment inundated with sort of trainers and online courses, most of whom live in Dubai and have a very different lifestyle. And that's just at the moment. I think that my concern about what's going on with health in the UK is it's becoming more polarized. That if talking about the algorithm again, there seems to be a lot of people, certainly my algorithm, your algorithm says that, who are having matcha for breakfast, spending the day in exercising, looking after their wellness, their self, be that their mental health, their anxiety, whatever that may be, looking after themselves in some way. And that feels quite sort of not necessarily normal, but commonplace. On the other end of the scale is what someone, which I think when you're in clinic, when you see people in clinic, is what we don't really see, is what, if you like, the government call working families, which is people who don't necessarily have the time or the resources to devote to themselves. This sounds like a real judgment, by the way. It's not. This is just what I feel it is, making ends meet, whatever the right phrases are. So there's a lot of middle class people. I am very middle class. I can't help that. Saying we ought to be doing this. We ought to be doing meal prep. We must be having so much protein per day, etc., etc. But these things, for a large majority of the country, are unaffordable and unattainable, and so they become just as sort of ridiculous as the reformer Pilates and the matcha in the mornings, that sort of thing, which is a lovely aspiration, but not really achievable unless you completely change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do think we're seeing these two totally different ends of the spectrum right now. And obviously, one thing that's on a lot of people's minds right now is weight loss. It seems more than ever. I know this is a specialty of yours, particularly with GLP-1 medication. So, can I start by asking you, when it comes to weight loss, what would you say is the most common mistake you see clients making?
Inconsistency. And I often say to clients that, when they come to me, right from the beginning of my career in 1999, that you have to see managing your weight in the same way as managing your finances. This is something you have to do consistently. So, and often I will use the analogy of finances and income, etc., rather than weight and calories. So if we look at it simply from finances, if you manage your finances well as you can, given splurges, given holidays, given savings, etc., then you will have a happier time than someone who, boom or bust, has a bad credit record, works to rebuild it, puts money away, spends it all unwisely. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't, but yes, there's splurges and yes, there's looking after yourself, etc. But if you were paid on the 30th, on the last day of every month, and you went out in the first week of every month and bought new speakers, a new television, and a new suit, you would understand that the income that you had left for the rest of the month would be severely curtailed. We understand that when it comes to money. Um, and if you do that every single month, you're really going to come a cropper. But somehow we see the weight loss as something that we lose the weight, then we carry on. And I think that the biggest mistake is the inconsistency in the idea that you have to attack weight loss as if it's a project. Once the project is done, you move on to something else. Because maintaining your weight and managing your weight in the very long term requires consistency, and that's really boring. It's really dull and it feels constrained. It feels like something else is what is managing your life rather than the wonderful things you could be doing or eating or spending or buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this analogy. And if you don't mind, I might actually borrow that in clinic.
Oh, yeah,
But
no, do. Absolutely.
this one is not just for weight loss, it's our nutrition in general, gut health, hormone health, anything I'm talking to my clients about with nutrition. It's absolutely true. I feel like when it comes to weight loss, people are all of a sudden in such a rush. They realize they've got, an event a couple of weeks away, and all of a sudden they want to click their fingers and lose the weight. So
Well, let me try. I think that's really interesting because I think that if we see weight loss as a project, that the one of the ways that weight loss companies, books, whatever it may be, have sold weight loss is lose weight fast.
Mm.
In other words, it's like a get rich quick scheme. If you saw an ad saying, earn 20 grand a year from staying at home and not doing anything, you would know this is a probable scam. That, it's not likely, but we are sold the equivalent, and perhaps not that dramatic when it comes to weight loss, which is you can lose 7 pounds in 7 days. And by the way, I hold my hand up to that because one of my books in the early 2000s had lose 7 pounds in 7 days as the strapline. I didn't like it. I didn't want it there, but I'm guilty for allowing it to happen because that's how people sold books.
you have to
There you
get
go.
people to pick up the books to get your message across.
Exactly. And the message was, yes, you can do that, but I wouldn't, sort of thing. But so
Yeah.
what's happened, what's really there's a very unfortunate dovetailing of the GLP-1 drugs that actually allows you to lose weight fast, but something else is doing it for you. Yet fast weight loss, rapid weight loss is absolutely disastrous and should be discouraged in every case, be that with a GLP-1 drug, keto, one of my books from the early 2000s, whatever it is, fast weight loss cannot be maintained, which takes us back to the consistency aspect.
And what are those negative aspects from, really rapid weight loss, whether on GLP-1s or not?
Well, first of all, let's look at if you're having too few calories to meet your energy requirements and those calories cannot be compensated by your fat stores, something has to be broken down, muscle, and which is the obvious one. We hear about this all the time with GLP-1. And of course, that it's as if taking GLP-1 is responsible for muscle loss. It's not. In part it is, but actually it's the rapid weight loss that is responsible for the muscle breakdown. So whether that's keto, whether that's starving, whether that's only eating 500 calories once a day, whatever it may be, if you are losing weight too rapidly, more than the body can actually handle, you will catabolize, break down some of your muscle. Number one. Number two, you cannot be consistent on that few calories, on so few calories, which of course leads to problems in the longer term because we have something called, this, our set point, which is our set point at which the calories in equal the energy out. So if you are eating the equivalent of, say, 2,000 calories a day, and through eating, walking, talking, breathing, exercising, you are using 2,000 calories a day, you will not lose weight, you will not gain weight. Now, of course, this is rough because there are other nuances that have to be taken into account. And calories are an uncomfortable truth. And a lot of people say calories don't count. Well, until we come up with something better, calories are what we have. So on that 2,000, if you then go down to, say, 1,400 calories, this forces the body to go into its stores of glucose, which is now sitting, in uncomfortable places as fat. And that is what causes fat loss. However, the metabolism slows down to meet. You can't fool your metabolism any more than you can fool your credit record, going back to that slightly torturous analogy now. That what will happen is that the calories, your set point adapts. So it was 2,000, and maybe over time, in inconsistencies and repeated cycles of dieting, it's now 1,800 calories. So when you go back to your normal eating of 2,000 calories, you're now 200 calories in excess, which is often why people say, I regained the weight and more, but I haven't changed my habits. And so one of the uncomfortable truths about weight loss and weight gain is not just the consistency, but also understanding how your metabolism changes to adapt to your new calorie intake. Number one. Number two, we all get older. And so your metabolism will slightly slow down. We hear it from our 30s onwards. That's more likely to happen. Couple that with repeated cycles of dieting, and you have a problem that you're storing up for the future. Now, I'm 62, and so I know all these things from my experience as well. Less so perhaps than others. I mean, I understand them on I understand the science behind it, but I've not really, I've always managed my weight. And that doesn't mean I'm lucky. That doesn't mean I just had a bit of knowledge. And I managed my weight. And it wasn't until about, I think, 2021 that I didn't manage my weight with lockdown, family issues, stress, etc. I didn't manage my weight and I just ate what I wanted. And before I knew it, I gained 8 kilos. And I kidded myself, by the way. You know, I kidded myself that maybe my drying, the setting on my dryer is too high because my clothes are getting smooth.
Brilliant.
It's amazing. I did actually kid myself. I honestly pretended I didn't notice. It's such a weird thing. Anyway, and it wasn't until the beginning of 2024, maybe 2024, that I sort of just went back to managing my weight. And that coincided with the rise of GLP-1. So I have a lot of people say to me, you must be on a GLP-1 because you've lost 8 or 10 kilos. And I'm not. I didn't qualify. I have no moral objection to them whatsoever. Quite the opposite. I just didn't qualify and it wasn't on my radar. Maybe if that was today, because GLP-1s are far more on people's radars, maybe I would take one. I don't know. I have no moral objection to them at all.
Amazing. Okay. Well, there's a lot of things to pick up on from
Yes.
that. First of all, let's go back to muscle mass. Why is this so disastrous that rapid weight loss can lead to rapid muscle mass decline?
Well, if you have fewer muscle mass, firstly, you have more likelihood of early death. I don't mean 2 a.m. I mean a shortened lifespan. You have more likelihood of falls and fractures because you don't have the stability, the core stability. Your metabolism will slow down because muscle is the largest user of glucose apart from the brain. You will become less active. You will become tired more easily. All these things contribute towards general aging, not necessarily ill health, but slowing down.
Mhm.
And maintaining muscle mass is extremely important because we have a natural sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass from our 40s, 50s onwards. So if you add to that by not eating enough and forcing your body to break down muscle to meet your calorie requirement, then you are really compounding what is already a potential issue.
Absolutely. Muscle mass is so, so important as we age and throughout all stages of life. So let's move on to talk about what do we actually know about the data in terms of long-term safety? Because I know we've got, I think, around 2 million people in the UK taking GLP-1s, but I know that a lot of people are talking about the long-term effects, saying that it's not known, it feels like a relatively new medication. So what's your stance? Are their fears reasonable?
They're reasonable, they're just unfounded. Just because we haven't heard of a drug doesn't mean it didn't exist before. Now, GLP-1s have been in use for 20 something years already because they've been used in the management of type 2 diabetes. So, in other words, managing glucose levels by affecting the way the food moved through the body and also the way that the insulin is produced was already in use effectively. So, we've actually got an awful lot of data about the safety of these drugs. Now, I can understand people saying we don't know the long term effects and also what happens when you stop taking them. That's another issue. And my answer to the latter, by the way, is what happens when you stop taking any medication. You,
That's true.
anyway, we have an awful lot of data about how safe these drugs are. That doesn't mean they are without side effects. And one of the side effects is taking a dose that's not right for you, which leads on to another conversation about how people are sourcing the medications and how, to what extent they're truly monitored by their healthcare providers. But in terms of safety, It's one of the safer drugs. It's been around for an awful long time. We have an awful lot of data on it. And also the 2 million people taking it are adding to the richness of that data because yes, there are side effects, especially when you use them improperly, but an awful lot of people are taking them with a huge amount of success as well. I'm not in the pay of Big Pharma. I don't get sponsored by Mounjaro or Wegovy or anything else. I just was very cynical about these drugs, did a lot of research, and now see how they work and truly understand how they work and the benefits they bring.
Amazing. Okay, I think that's going to be really reassuring to a lot of people. Now, are there specific nutritional deficiencies that people on GLP-1s should be aware of?
Well, it's interesting because if you're not eating enough, you're actually going to be your diet, your intake of nutrients is going to be poor for everything, every single one. And there's a lot of data to suggest that magnesium, calcium, and strangely not omega-3, I don't know why, I wouldn't have thought that was one of the things, are specifically effective, but that's because they've been researched. I don't know of any studies as yet that looks at every single nutrient, but of course it makes complete sense that if you are eating 800 calories a day, you will be having only 800 calories worth of nutrients. And on that subject, by the way, if you want to lose weight on 800 calories a day, you can have half a bottle of wine and a pack of Haribos. That's 800 calories. You'll still lose weight. Rubbish diet, terrible level of nutrient intake. But even if you were to have, steamed kale, even if you were to have the best possible food, you're still only having a very small amount. So there's no way that the nutrients that you need can be delivered. And one of the uncomfortable truths about the calorie intake, etc., is that on your recommended 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day for an adult woman, 2.5 for a man, that takes into account the nutrient intake, the likely nutrient intake. So if you follow all the health advice, 5 a day, so many grams of fiber, so many grams of not exceeding 6 grams of salt, etc., etc., the sugar, fat, saturated fat, you should be getting all the nutrients you need from your diet. Now, we know that that's not necessarily the case because none of us have a perfect diet every single day. But how can you possibly get in all the nutrients you need on 800 or 1,000 calories a day? And you're only going to be having that level of calories if your dose is wrong.
Mm.
This is my really boring point about the dose, and I'm not a clinician, but I see people who are struggling to eat, and that becomes quite some people, it's like a disordered eating having worried about food noise, having worried about overeating, they've now got to the point where they're undereating, but it feels wonderful. And, this is the unspoken part because they're not eating enough, yet they're losing weight, which is the golden, that's the holy grail.
People think the more the merrier, but as with any medication, if you had diabetes, you wouldn't say to your doctor, give me the maximum dose of insulin. I'm going to, take
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
fall,
I
as
can
with
do
any medication.
but there's an interesting point is that you're taking your bloods, you're measuring your HbA1c with your doctor, you're probably taking your bloods every single day yourself, and that's how you know if your dose is working. If you're on a GLP-1 and you get it from a private clinic, I don't mean that you've lied or that you've done anything wrong, but you are getting it from a private clinic, which the vast majority of those 2+ million people are getting it from, then you are not likely to be having daily conversations with your provider. You are not likely to be having weekly conversations. You may not have any conversations at all. So let's say you start on a modest dose of Mounjaro. I think that's, let's say, 2.5 milligrams. And that cuts your calorie intake at first. Now, one of the reasons we have increasing doses is because we build up a level of tolerance. So it's not to say you shouldn't increase your dose, but why are you increasing your dose? Is it because built up a level of tolerance and the food noise is coming back? Is your appetite coming back? Is 5 milligrams right for you? Do you stop at 5? Do you go to 7.5? These are questions that we should be asking our healthcare provider, but that relationship is not there. It's just not built into the system, and it's a criticism of both the user and the healthcare providers. Now, a lot of healthcare providers, the online pharmacies, and I'm not saying they're being negligent, offer these services, but you have to ask for them. I mean, I've had plenty, 4 of them, I think 5 now, ask if I would join their nutritional offering. It's fine, all very well. So they put me and you and whoever else on their websites, you've got to ask for it. You've got to pay for it. So we're just an add-on. And if it's built into the offering, there's obviously a cost attached to that, which increases the price, which is already pretty high. So my question to users and also to healthcare providers is, why are we scrolling up through the doses if the 5 milligrams is keeping you at, say, a happy 1,800 calories a day or 1,600 calories a day? You're meeting all your protein targets, you're exercising correctly, you're doing weight-bearing exercise, you may be having a protein supplement and or a collagen supplement, whatever it may be. Why are you then increasing the dose?
Yeah, it's so important to make sure that we're not overdoing it, that people who are taking these medications are on the appropriate dose for their height, their weight, their lifestyle, their
And their
psychological, how they're
consistency.
doing. Yeah,
And that consistency.
absolutely.
I mean, in clinic, it's kind of hard. I have more and more people coming along saying, "I'm taking a GLP-1. How do I do it right?" Now, obviously, I've written about it, but I've got more and more people coming for, one-off appointments,
Mhm.
which, I absolutely encourage because, it's less than a month's worth of the price of an injection.
Yeah.
Um, and, you hopefully people will get a lot from it. And it's a service that the healthcare providers don't. It's not a criticism of it. It's just not possible. It's not baked into the offering. And if it was, it would become unaffordable.
I think it's so good that you offer that. And let's assume someone is taking the right dose. Appetite suppression is still, of course, one of the main mechanisms that's built into whatever extent of the dosage. We know we should be consuming fermented foods for our gut health, but have you tried kimchi or sauerkraut? This episode is sponsored by the Cultured Collective, whose kimchi and sauerkraut are naturally fermented, unpasteurized, and tested for live cultures, as well as being a source of fiber. They've won awards for their flavor, so I'm not the only one who thinks they taste amazing. It's really easy to add a scoop of these real live foods to all kinds of meals. I love adding kimchi to the side of my eggs and topping avocado toast with sauerkraut. They're offering listeners of the Gut 360 podcast a huge 50% off their kimchi and sauerkraut, so head to the show notes to find out more. This episode is sponsored by IM8. As a nutritionist, I'm always talking about the importance of a 360-degree approach to health, supporting your gut, energy, immune system, and sleep consistently, not just when something feels off. That's why I've been using IM8 Daily Essentials as part of my morning routine. It's a comprehensive formula with 92 nutrient-rich ingredients, including probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics to support the gut, alongside key vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants to help fill in the gaps of modern living. It's not a replacement for a balanced diet, but it's a really convenient way to help support your foundations daily, especially when life feels busy. If you're looking for something simple to support your mind, body, and gut, check out IM8 Daily Essentials. Use the code GUT360 for a special discount and free welcome kit on your first order. So, how do we, in practical terms, make sure people are getting in the right amount of nutrients, of protein? What could their plate
Well,
look like at breakfast, lunch, and
um,
dinner?
one thing, let's start with how do they do it? What I ask people to do if they're taking a GLP-1 is to download something like MyFitnessPal or something, get the free version, and be absolutely honest about what you're eating and putting it in. And therefore, you will get back that you're eating 1,100 calories or 1,900 calories, whatever. You will understand your protein intake, your calorie intake, your carb intake, all those things you'll get a clear idea of. And we use that as the basis because a lot of people don't know because they only see, understandably, food in terms of good or bad, calories in, calories out. So you might say to someone, well, how many calories are in an avocado? Well, that's 340 in a small avocado. What else is there? And so we all know there's kind of good fats, but there's protein too. There's some fiber, there's some selenium, there's et cetera, et cetera. So it's, if you like, weaning people off looking at calories and looking at the nutrient intake instead. So breakfast, to answer your question, may be Greek yogurt with berries and nuts. Now you may have that anyway. Let's look at portion size. It may be that you have a 300 or 400 calorie portion size in the morning. Lunch may be 600 or 700 calories, be that a chicken salad, could be a sandwich, whatever it is, as long as you're getting the fiber, protein, and as many nutrients as you can.
Yeah.
An evening meal, you should arrive at your evening meal nicely hungry, not dreading it. And a red light should go off if you have no appetite. I think when people first scroll up through their doses, that's quite normal. And then there's the body adapts. And I think that if you continue having no appetite, this is a red flag. However delicious and liberating it may feel, this is not a good sign.
No, absolutely. And I actually like that you encourage people to track just to get an understanding of what they're actually eating. Because often when a client comes to me, I'll get them to keep a food diary for a few days, whatever means they're using. I think it is so important to be honest with yourself, to write it down, because people forget about those little late night snacks that they're having, or the fizzy drink that they forgot to mention. And actually having an understanding is so, so important. So
But of course, and it goes the other way. When people are
yeah,
not eating enough, this is a real reckoning because,
yeah.
and I've just been away, but I had a client at the beginning of January, who I'm actually seeing again tomorrow, who had been on GLP-1 for about a year and then took a break because having IVF, etc., and then had successfully given birth and now was back on a GLP-1. And he was kind of desperate to get back on it. But really struggling with the idea of, I think her dilemma was that she was feeding her child, making sure that her newborn was getting all the nutrients, making sure that she was getting all the nutrients she needed for successful and breastfeeding, but now wanted to lose weight for various reasons, wasn't possible, or the weight she could lose through traditional methods weren't good. So anyway, went back in GLP-1 and appetite cut straight away. It was almost as if the interim 16, 17 months haven't happened. So her appetite went straight back. I mean, she thought it was marvelous, but wasn't eating enough. And so looking at it from the other perspective, bear in mind, sorry to jump around, but uh, if you've been having, if food has been an issue for you for a lot of your life, and now you have no appetite, the idea of eating more feels upside down. It's a bit of a conflict. So there's not a re-education, but a reconnection with food as nutrients and what it can give you and provide for you, rather than just food as making you fat or thin.
I think that is so important. I actually wanted to ask you, how can someone really protect their relationship with food whilst they're taking a medication that does change their hunger cues? And you have all these thoughts and, the elimination of food noise, which is great, but then you're almost thinking more about it because you're thinking less about it. And it's exciting and thrilling and all of this. So, what can people actually do?
I think there's an interesting question. Well, first of all, question your dose. Your dosage may be wrong. Now, I'm not a doctor, obviously, so I'm treading on, not my remit, if you like, but question your dose. Look at your nutrient intake. Be absolutely, number two is look at your nutrient intake. Be ruthless about what you write down and the MyFitnessPal or whichever app you use. Understand that your nutrient intake, you may be losing weight, but in the longer term, you're not supporting skin, hair, muscles, bones, etc. And we do get older, of course. Now, I'm a lot older than you, and the idea I could never imagine being 62, but in a heartbeat, it seems to have happened. And so I think that this is less of an issue for people who are older because we have a bit of experience about how the body changes when you're older. I think if you're in your 20s and your 30s, the idea of getting older and that your body's not going to be more or less exactly the same and in great shape, etc., is more of a concept than a reality, somewhere out there in the far distance, etc. So if you're a younger person, understand that you will get older, that your skin quality will change, and you are exacerbating upcoming issues by not eating enough and not getting the right nutrient. You cannot necessarily replace those nutrients with supplements. You can to some extent, but nothing beats the quality and also the combinations of nutrients that happen in food. It's always food first, supplement second.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point. And another thing, just touching on supplements here, is fiber. People skip the fiber when they take supplements instead of the food itself. Let's say, they're, I don't know, taking vitamin C instead of eating fruit. You're then not getting any of that fiber. So let's talk about gut health. As you know, I specialize in gut health. This is the Gut 360 podcast. So, what role does fiber and gut health play here in weight loss and GLP-1s in particular?
What's interesting, well, firstly, your short chain fatty acids are going to support the health of the good bacteria, which of course will in turn have an effect on your metabolism. So if you're not having enough fiber, short chain fatty acids, not having enough good bacteria, or at least your good bacteria is not supported, then once again, this proves that the connection with the gut, that your metabolism will suffer. Now, the problem with fiber is that we know that fiber is filling. We know that fiber actually can help set
Satiety?
that one. It's a weird one. Anyway, and so we understand all of that. But if you're eating less, then the macros go as well. And protein is all we hear about. But fiber, we don't hear enough about. And I think fiber is about to have its moment in the sun.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that people barely get 18 grams a day, barely, when they're having a normal diet. How do you squish 25 grams of fiber, as well as everything else, into a diet that has fewer calories? And the answer is you've got to work at it.
Mhm.
You've got to work at it. You've got to understand it. And of course, the long term effects of not supporting your gut health, well, you know more about that than I do. A lot of clients say, well, can't I just support it with the probiotic? But you and I also know that there aren't any health claims for probiotics. And so the answer is you can't necessarily do that. So I encourage my clients to have foods that contain fiber as well as protein. So if you're going to be having your Greek yogurt, your kefir, your sauerkraut, pickled vegetables, fantastic because you get the fiber as well as the protein. But, again, make sure you use the MyFitnessPal or other apps. Have a real understanding of what you're eating, how much you're eating. Don't skimp just because you're losing weight.
Yeah, I think that is so, so important. I do agree fiber is finally starting to have its moment and stepping into the limelight. It's been all about protein for a while. And don't get me wrong, protein is obviously so, so important, but we need to think about all the nutrients as well.
But
So,
listen, do you think that's partly because of the only legal health claim for fiber is bulking up the stool?
well,
You know,
probably that has a big role to
I mean,
play
it's not, it's, you
there.
can't really, if something's high in fiber, you just want to say high in fiber. No one's going to put on their food label, bulk up your stool. It just,
It's so
it's not really a
true.
foodie kind of claim, is it?
No, but fiber is about so much more than just your bowel
Absolutely.
movements. We need it for so many things, for our cholesterol, for managing our hunger. It keeps us feeling full between meals as well. It's amazing for our gut microbes. Obviously, our gut microbiome plays a huge role in our immune system, our hormones, our metabolism, our mental health, our heart health. The list goes on and on.
But how do we do all that within fewer calories? And that's where look at your dose, make sure you're getting enough. If you're not eating enough, this is a red flag. This is just as bad as eating too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. Now, I feel like a lot of people who are taking GLP-1s are doing so in secret. Why do you think there's still this stigma around weight loss
Yeah,
medication?
I do. I mean, I think that in the early stages, people get away with it. But when you've lost a lot of weight, you can't really get away with it. It's just, oh, I'm walking more, I'm not eating sugar. Eventually you're going to have to tell someone. And I think that, firstly, if you do it in private, if you do it shamefully, and I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but there is a shame attached to it because it feels to a lot of people like cheating. Of course, it's not cheating any more than using your car or public transport is cheating and getting from A to B. You're using technology. And we are very lucky that this medical technology exists now. And, more people died of MIs, myocardial infarction, with high cholesterol than die with lower cholesterol. So you can take a statin. Is that cheating? Is using Head and Shoulders cheating? You know,
A
I,
really
I,
good point.
I don't mean to be flippant. I am being flippant about it, but actually, is it cheating? So more people are doing it with secrecy, and that means they're not getting the right advice. And so I urge anyone, if you are doing it privately in secret, check on Mumsnet, check on a local group, talk to people. You are just using modern medical technology and more power to you. If you are using it when you don't need to, that's a different aspect. That's a different conversation. And that trips onto need because I think there's a lot of people, as part of this shame and the secrecy about it, that still believe it's cheating because you haven't put in the hard work. And I think there's a very interesting moral and societal issue there, which is that and I'm not saying I agree with this is not what I believe, but if being fat is bad, you have to put in the work to lose it because that's the penance you pay for having let yourself get fat. And if you're not paying the price, you don't deserve it. Now, I don't believe any of that. But if we have that attitude, then you can see why people do it in secret, people do it in private. And I think that's miserable and shameful in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing to be ashamed of if, you can allow this to help you to get into shape and support your long-term health and reduce your risk of diabetes and heart disease and high cholesterol
Of course.
and all kinds of other things, take it if it's going to help you. And
Yeah.
as
And
you've
you can
said,
afford it, unfortunately.
if you can afford it and you can get access to it, as you've said, I think there are people who take it who don't need it, who just take it as a quick fix. We see a lot of celebrities on it, and I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but I do think that it can be, of course, so helpful for so many people. Now, what happens when someone comes off it? Is weight gain inevitable, weight regain, or can that be prevented with the right nutritional and behavioral support?
I would love to say that the latter is true. I urge people, when I write about this, to see this as a golden opportunity to reset your relationship with food, your understanding of nutrition, all of which you can do. But one of the ways that GLP-1 is so effective is by reducing the food noise, is by reducing your desire to eat.
Mm.
If you reduce that, take it away completely, the food noise comes back. And which means you're once again going to have to use willpower to not exceed a healthy calorie intake. And we all know that willpower, you can be good for 5 days. Can you be good for 7, 14, 21 consistently? I don't know. And there's a lot of criticism I hear about one, the drugs don't work. Well, yeah, nothing works if you stop doing it. It's not, this is not new. Show me a drug that works when you stop taking it, apart from antibiotics, uh, so, which is the exception to the rule. But I think that it's this idea that once you start, you can't stop, and therefore you're serving yourself up to big pharma to be a customer for life. Yeah, true. What's the alternative? Right? Because it may be that once you've got to a weight that you're comfortable with, that you and your healthcare provider agree is the right weight for you or something that you can maintain, it may be that again, you can reduce your dose down to a small dose. You can microdose every other week. Everyone does it differently. And that may be at that happy point between a food noise, in other words, being nicely hungry and not overwhelmed with this desire to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all individuals. So, what would you say for someone who either is on it or has just come off in terms of exercise? Because I always think it's important to take that 360-degree approach and look at our lifestyle as well. What types of exercise should people be doing either whilst on or if they're coming off?
Well, weight bearing exercise is absolutely crucial. You cannot have a successful experience with GLP-1 without doing weight bearing exercise. And it doesn't need to be complicated. I'm not a personal trainer, but go and see a trainer at the gym, have a couple of sessions, or YouTube, countless weight bearing exercise you can do at home with a chair and a bottle of water. It doesn't need to be expensive, but weight bearing is absolutely crucial. You will not have an optimum experience with GLP-1s during or after without it. And for a lot of people, by the way, that they've used exercise as a way to lose weight. So the idea of maintaining muscle to maintain your health, again, a mind shift, but it can be done. Again, this is a golden opportunity to reset your understanding of weight, nutrients, exercise, etc. And I really would urge anyone to take it because it's, as I said, we are the first generation to ever have had this opportunity, and it would be a great pity to squander it just to be thin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're totally right. Ian, we finish each guest episode with a quick fire round.
Ooh,
So, are
okay.
you ready?
I am.
What's something that seems healthy but often backfires for your health?
Not necessarily backfires, but the idea of having to cook everything from scratch,
Oh,
as if
that's a
that's the
good
only
one.
way of being healthy. Because I think that if you like, not necessarily ready meals, because people think of the worst possible kind of ready meals, but I think that the idea that you have to cook everything from scratch, again, puts you in this position of having to be consistent with that. And I think that there's a lot of pre-made food that's pretty darn good.
I actually think that's a really important point. People think that they just can't eat healthily because they don't have the time in the day to cook all their meals from scratch. But you're right, there are all kinds of things that we can pick up on the go that we can keep in our freezer that are perfectly healthy. So, great
Absolutely.
one. What is one healthy habit that people can start implementing today?
I think it's consistency. Start today, understand what you can do within the boundaries of your day-to-day life, how much money you have, how much money you're willing to spend, et cetera, and be consistent.
What's your favorite gut-friendly food?
Kefir. Love kefir.
Amazing. What is your go-to breakfast on busy days?
I have the same breakfast every day. I'm really boring, which is full fat Greek yogurt, berries, and the green unsalted pistachios. Love those. And
Sounds
coffee.
delicious. What kind of coffee?
Black. Americano.
Okay. Okay, nice. What's one nutrition myth or wellness trend that you wish would disappear?
Well, we've slightly touched on this too. Number one, GLP-1s are cheating. And number two, that you can get all the nutrients you need within a small calorie intake.
Mm. What is one healthy habit you're still working on?
Sleep. My sleep is just terrible. I mean, it really is. And I blame all sorts of things. It's not my fault. Nothing, none of the time, obviously.
Of
No, my
course
sleep
not.
is terrible and has been forever.
Gosh, okay. Well, you know what to work on. At least the awareness is there. And we will finish this round with a few fun ones. Coffee or matcha? Well, I think I know what you're going to say to this.
Coffee. Can't bear matcha.
Favorite coffee shop?
Um, I don't really have one. My Nespresso machine.
Overnight oats or eggs on toast?
Eggs.
Brilliant. And if you could only do one type of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Spin. Love spin classes. Could do them all. In fact, I did too many for a while. And I had to stop myself and do more weight bearing exercise because
Really?
yeah. But if I could do spin and that counted as weight bearing exercise, I could do it every single day. Love it.
Where do you go for spin?
Gym around the corner, Equinox.
Nice. And lastly, what is one word you associate with a healthy gut?
Regularity.
Hmm,
That's right.
fair. Thank you so much, Ian, for being a guest on the Gut 360 podcast. If someone wants to learn more about what you do, where's the best place for them to go? And also, can you tell us a bit about your new book? Because
Of
you sent it
course.
to me, I read it, it's brilliant, and I would
Thank you
highly
very much.
recommend. So
Okay.
tell us.
I'll do the book first. It's called the GLP-1 Handbook: How to Eat Well When You're Taking Weight Loss Medications. It's been out for a couple of months, doing really well. Covers everything from how they work, the history of them, all of which is relevant, to what to look out for, and just basically literally is your handbook from beginning to end. My website's ianmarber.com, and I'm most active on Instagram, which is ianmarber_, because someone else nabbed my name years ago.
How selfish of them.
I know.
Thanks so much for your time again.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. And thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Gut 360 podcast. I think most of us know at least one person taking GLP-1s like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. So I am going to ask you guys to send this episode to anyone you think would benefit from hearing it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll be back in your ears next Monday.